known as Victoria. Um, and just a second, can we stop the recording? I just wanted to thank you. Awesome. So our first question is mostly kind of geared to Lori, but we're hoping that some of the other panelists will also be able to like chime in as well. We're just wondering, based on your experience, what would you tell aspiring law students to avoid with their applications? And also kind of paired with this, what is important to include in your application?
Oh, wow. What would I avoid? Okay, I'm going to actually take that backwards. I'm going to say what's important. What I've been saying to applicants this year is it's not about law school, it's about you. We're much more interested in who you are, your lived experiences, your reasons for law, your interest in law, what you can bring to the table that's really going to add value to the community in the classroom that we're trying to build. I think the biggest mistakes I see people do in their application is they really try to impress us with big words. And I was part of this group, or I did, I was the VP of this, I did this and I got this scholarship and I did this and this and this and this. And they spend so much time trying to impress us with their awards and their contributions and what they've done, that they don't actually take the time to tell us anything about them. They don't take the time to tell us why law. So for example, I'm going to, if I may, throw out a question to the group here right now. And I just want you to throw it back at me. You can put it in the chat, you can yell it out, you can whatever, however you want to do it. But this gives me some insight into who I'm talking to. So my question to you is, why law? Has anybody thought about why law? Maybe the students who are currently in law could say what was their why law.
Oh, I got somebody in the chat saying that I want to try and use the legal system to help people. That's one question. That's one response to that question.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else?
I can jump in. I wanted to go to law school because I thought it was a good use of the skills that I already had. So I really liked research and writing and public speaking and advocacy. And so I wanted to further develop those skills. And I thought this was a good way to do it instead of doing something like a master's that was more solely academic focused. This would kind of give me more practical skills to do things like helping people and advocating for people in the long term.
Awesome. Thank you. So if you want to help people, why? And why do you feel law is the pathway that's going to help you to do that? If you want to help people, why not go into medicine or social work or child and youth care or kinesiology or dentistry? Or there's so many disciplines that are helping people disciplines. Why law? It's a really big piece that I think people who apply to law school often don't even really know the answer to that. And if you're applying to UVic Law, you really need to spend some time and think about that and get very, very clear on why you are applying for law school. So if you want to help people, what I want to know, that tells me nothing about you. You need to dig that down a little bit deeper and give me and the admissions committee further insight into who you are. So why is it important for you to help people? Do you want to help, for example, people who are involved in intimate partner abuse? Do you want to help people who are homeless? Do you want to help racialized individuals? Do you want to help minoritized individuals? Are you interested in helping the environment? Tell us about you. So I would say that's the biggest mistake people make. And the most powerful personal statement is when somebody can speak from their heart with authenticity, with vulnerability, and be strategic about writing that whole application. That makes a powerful application.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lori. Does anyone else on the panel have any like insights into that? Maybe like what it was like in terms of applying to law school and like how you navigated trying to convey those things?
Sure, I could add something. I feel like I was pretty clear on my why just from being like an Indigenous person in Canada. Like my dad always said, since the day like we were born, the Indian Act is enacted on us. So you need to understand law to like either change it or like fight back. So I feel like my upbringing definitely was like encountering with that. But yeah, that's like where I come
I think also, if I can jump in here, I think it's really important to start early. Because I think the question that Lori is asking is not something that I mean, maybe for some people it's quite intuitive, but for a lot of folks, I think you start with the I want to help people, like that's great. But then getting to the specific reason, I think takes a lot of time, a lot of thinking. And so I'm not actually sure if I ever gave a very compelling answer to that question, to be honest, which is why I was staying pretty quiet there. But I definitely did start early thinking about it because you gotta try something. It's got to be authentic and it's got to be you. And I know it's really annoying to come to these panels and everyone's just like, oh, just be yourself. It's like, okay, I got that. Like fair enough. But I do think that if you try to make up a reason which you don't feel a connection to, a lot of people like Lori are quite good at figuring this out. And they can tell. And also, then you're not doing it for the right reasons, and so that you're not doing yourself a favor either. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like when I had been sent these questions ahead of time, I said just explain your why. Like I think that that is what it comes down to. And that vulnerability piece that you spoke to is so huge. Like I think being able to show them a little bit about who you are, not just that like you're a robot, they're looking to see a little bit more about what you've done outside of like the amazing list of achievements that they're gonna otherwise receive in a different format. So often you'll have like a personal statement and then like, you know, all the things you were involved in. If you were involved in things, if you had like work experience, those things will often be separate. So the ability to explain your why is really the chance to kind of show them a little bit about who you are as a person. And then the other things that I kind of thought a little bit about for this question in terms of avoiding is like obviously grammatical errors and like following instructions. So if you're applying to multiple law schools, a lot of them will ask different things of you or have different prompts for the personal statements. So be really careful about adjusting those to each different school that you're applying to ensure that you're following the instructions really carefully. So you're not just like counted out just because, you know, you missed a specific part of a question. So I think that goes to the starting early piece that Tim spoke to.
Awesome. Thank you so
And
much for everybody's answers. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no. I mean, I think it was just building off of what Jules said, which is just like, I think it's not like a personal statement which like would change, I think, dramatically depending on the school. Like I think that the common narrative is still there, but for sure, like the school you're applying to, I think matters. Like there is a bit of you want to show a connection to that you've been deliberate about your choices, and about the school that you're applying to. So McGill has a huge emphasis on trying to do legal studies critically and having a common and civil teaching the common and civil law system, trying to bring in some indigenous legal traditions as well. That's something that UVic does extremely well, to my understanding. And so I think like being mindful that that is the school that you're applying to, and making sure that you're reflecting that back to the committee is probably a wise approach. But again, like I don't really know. We don't really know what goes on in Lori's profession here. So
No, you've articulated that really well. The only other thing I would say that's come up quite a bit through recruiting this season is we all anticipate you're going to be applying to multiple law schools. So as people have said here, make sure that you follow the instructions for each application carefully. And don't in your personal statement say, you know, if you're applying to UVic, please don't say, I'm so excited to be submitting this application to the University of Toronto. It's kind of like, great, see you later. And it happens a lot. So again, it goes to that attention to detail. And the other thing I would say is for UVic law, I can't speak for the other law schools, but a big mistake I've seen this year is a lot of people will be writing their personal statement and they will share it with somebody, which is fine. And what I'm saying to people is do that, have them check for grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes. have you answered the questions? Does the narrative flow? Is there anything else that you could include that would really show yourself off to the admissions committee? Do not take feedback on the content of your personal statement. That content is yours and it belongs to you. I cannot tell you how many people I've worked with who were refused for September 2023, who came in and said, and I would ask them the why law, why UVic, you know, all of those questions, and they would beautifully articulate it to me. And I'd look at their personal statement and go, what happened? Where did it go? There's none of that is in here. And they would say to me, I had a friend who's a PhD candidate who looked at it and kind of went, dear God, you cannot include this level of personal information. You're applying to law school. Yeah, you are applying to law school. And we do want that level of information. You're not applying for a research program. You are applying for law school. So that content belongs to you.
Very well put, and I really appreciate that as somebody who tends to overshare a little bit and things like that. But I feel like in this sort of situation, it's definitely warranted. So I think that advice of just being authentic and speaking from your own personal experience, your own lived experience is very, very awesome. So thank you so much for everybody's responses. I think we'll move on to the next question, but this one's specifically talking about the GID program at UVic. So I feel like Lori and Kylie would be very well situated to answer this question. So basically the question is, at UVic, what is the main difference between the JID and the JD programs? And this could be in relation to the selection process, the program itself, the courses that you take as a JID student. Any and all thoughts are welcome. We could kick it off with Lori first, and then Kylie could follow as well to provide the student experience.
Sure. I think Kylie can probably speak more to the program itself. I can talk about some of the admission pieces. Generally the difference is the JD JID is 4 years, the JD is 3. As far as admission, you can apply to both programs. They require 2 separate applications. We have in the JD program, we have 4 streams for consideration. We have the JD General, we have the JD Inclusive, we have the JD Indigenous, and we have the JD Black admission stream. In the JD JID, we have 2. We have the JID General and the JID Inclusive. I think one of the biggest differences between the JD and the JID at the admission, at the application stage is the JID requires, we're going to look at your GPA, we're going to look at your LSAT, we're going to look at your personal statement. The JID also requires a JID statement, and it requires 2 letters of reference, one academic letter and one which speaks to your connection to community and your suitability for this particular program. The JD program, only the Inclusive and the Indigenous require references, and only the Inclusive, the Indigenous, and the Black require an additional statement to the personal statement. The JD JID is completely holistically reviewed. So what that means is, for both programs and across all streams, I'm going to calculate your GPA cumulatively. So from year 1 to year 3, or year 1 to degree completion, wherever you're at when you submit your application to UVic Law, I will calculate your GPA. Then I'm going to take your highest LSAT score, and they're weighted 50% each, which gives me what we call an index score. I'm going to do that again, like I say, across both programs, across all admission streams. In the JD JID, however, that index score, so your LSAT and your GPA, are not going to be the primary indicators of your potential to be successful in law school. They're really going to be looking at your personal statement. They're going to be looking at your JID statement, and they're really going to be looking at those references, most likely before they ever look at your GPA and LSAT. The other thing that I think really differentiates the JID from the JD as far as when we're evaluating applications is the JID committee has historically, for the past 2 years, has been primarily consists of Indigenous faculty, Indigenous staff, and Indigenous students. So I think I'll bump it over to Kylie for program stuff.
Thank you, Lori, for that. Yeah, like student experience. So the main difference is like the core courses are trans-systemic. So in my first year, I had John Burroughs teach us like Anishinaabe constitutional law. So we're learning constitutional law and like with John, and then like them both together. And like we had Val Napoleon and she taught us Gitsan, like property law. And then we had crim. So that was with David Millward, and that was like Cree law. So those three like courses, we had the exams and they were all like trans-systemic. So they're like, how does Indigenous law work with common law? Does it not in this circumstance, or like whatever like fact pattern is given in the exam? So honestly, like a lot of Indigenous law is not really like precedented right yet. Like there's a lot of cases. There's just a case, right, that just came out about the test for like UNDRIP. So like things are happening really quickly. So it's very like creative. So I felt like these exams were really creative, and that's why I kind of enjoyed first year, honestly, with those courses. And then in second year, we had contracts, which was trans-systemic, and we learned Chilcotin law as well. And then, oh, I think torts law, we missed that, but like other classes have gotten it, like Coast Salish, like tort law. So yeah, I'm in 4L, so I've taken like the field schools already. So I had my field school last spring semester, and that was in like the Northwest Territories. So that was in Dene Territory. So we're working with a nation for like the whole semester. And like what you're working on is like what the community wants. So like you're giving a deliverable of like what they want. So it's like really helpful also for like a community that doesn't have the resources, right? So like if you have like a lot of different law students working on different projects, then it's really helpful. And then this semester we're working with Cowichan Nation with Dr. Sarah Morales, and it's my favorite. I had to say it. It's my favorite. Like so far, it's been a really amazing semester, and I really like the projects that we're working on. Like I'm on a group, so we're on like a few different like working on like bylaws and stuff. So yeah, it's been really amazing, and like this is what I want to do, like do Indigenous law and like legal orders and like community work. I know that doesn't align with where I'm articling like at DOJ, but I know that you have to like learn a bunch of skills too as well. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you both. That was really insightful. I feel like I learned so much. Just a note for everyone watching. I just want to let you know that on the bottom of your screen, there's like a Q&A little box on the like bottom like right. And so we are trying to save time at the end to like answer some of the questions that come up from people that are participating. So if you want, you can use that and type your questions in there. You can also just message me or Jenna, and we can make sure as many questions as possible get answered. So moving on, we're gonna kind of talk about the process of like how you can kind of like prepare for law school. So we have a question about, do you have any recommendations regarding how you can optimize your time as an undergrad so that you can achieve future success in applying and attending law school? And more specifically, is there anything regarding extracurriculars, volunteer experience, or work experience that you should consider taking up during your time as an undergrad? And maybe we can start with like Tim or Juliet first for this one.
I can jump in. I think that it is really great to try to have a well-rounded undergrad. I think academic achievement is obviously something you like have to do in order to pass that like GPA threshold to get into law school, but there's so many other things that they look for that I think make you a good law student once you're here too. So time management in terms of extracurriculars is pretty key. I know a lot of people who are also athletes. Like there are so many different things that can teach you how to manage your time before you come into law school. And I don't think you should fret if you haven't made yourself incredibly busy yet. Like that's okay. So I really enjoyed being involved in different clubs and societies, and enjoyed being on the UVSS, and I was on the UPS for a bit. And I also worked while I was in school, which I think really helped me learn how to time block and just have your priorities in line for how you plan out your days and things like that. I think that's helpful in making you well-rounded, but also learning how to take care of yourself really early too. I think burnout is something that happens really often in your first semester of 1L and throughout law school. And so if you can learn how to prioritize taking care of yourself and finding rest where you can, I think that sets you up for success early on.
I think, yeah, there was a reason why I was like, I don't want to answer this question first, because I think a lot of really good points there. And I echo everything that was just said there by Jules. I also think, like, just to build off of the life habits thing, because I'm in my first semester, first year of law school, and I think I definitely underestimated the importance of just kind of really having a solid routine and being able to rely on a solid routine. Because the work is like, it's not a surprise to anyone. Like, it's quite, it's demanding. There's a lot going on, and you want to be ready for it and to be able to tackle that. And so just like getting proper sleep, like being efficient with your time, like I think these are skills which a lot of us are like definitely still learning on the fly in 1L, but really helpful, I think, if you start sooner. I also think one thing, because I don't know this magic formula to be completely honest, but I do think that something which an upper year had told me, which I applied when I was an undergrad, was to actually start forming connections with professors. It's very easy to just kind of sit in the back of a class and like get the grade that you want to get, and then that's it, and you move on. But to show some academic curiosity, to talk to professors and who are in fields that you're interested in, or to like, get to know them better, I think that can be helpful. First of all, just for yourself, and second of all, also, I think a lot of schools require academic references. At least for McGill, they required they only took academic references. They didn't take any other references, and so if I hadn't known that in advance, I might have not realized that this is something I should be doing. And ultimately, it's really fulfilling because I managed to do field course and research projects with profs at U Ottawa, which I wouldn't have done otherwise. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's something that I also hadn't realized in undergrad until towards the end, and that helped me when I applied to law school.
I think I'll jump in too, if that's okay. I was a student athlete in my undergrad. I competed in the golf, I competed in the sport golf, and that was a really long sport. Like all of our weekends were like just golfing the whole like both days. So like, I had to like get good at time management, and like that's kind of what taught me like good um skills that way. But yeah, like what was said before, like making relationships with your professors. And I feel like it was easier to make like those relationships in like the JID just because we like my class had a pretty close relationship with John. So we actually made an UNDRIP class. Like we had him like supervise it with Dr. Darcy Limburg. And then we all like collaborated in making that class. And then I also did like my major paper, which is a requirement in law school too. But yeah, with John. So I think, yeah, just to add that.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So I think it's a good time to potentially introduce just the big L word, LSAT. I feel like that's pretty front of sight, front of mind for a lot of undergrads who are potentially thinking of applying to law school, maybe even for this upcoming period or maybe for the next one. So given that, I think this is a good question for Tim, Juliet, and Kylie. I just want to hear everybody's experience about studying for the LSAT. So does anybody have any specific strategies? Do they have any success and fail stories or just success stories? And yeah, so any and all thoughts about study strategies, how to find success, and also how to find rest, because I think that's important too, how to balance it with other commitments like working or classes. So whoever wants to go first is up to you.
I'll go again. I can't do the silence. I only used free resources, and then I got some free Power Score books, or maybe I gave my friend like $20 or something to just use some like used books. They are also often in the library. Like I'm sure the UVic Law Library has some. Sometimes they do. I know Dal does. So sometimes you'll see an undergrad like studying for the LSAT, which is really exciting. And then I also used Khan Academy. So that was really where I focused my studying in that free resource. And then I bought a couple practice tests and got practice tests out of the books. And I think that focusing your time on doing full length tests is the way to learn how to do the LSAT. The biggest jump in a score during practicing that I got was after I let myself do a few untimed long form tests. So I let myself just have like 5 hours or something to just like work through every part of the problem, not be on like a super tough timeline. And that helped me just like truly learn how to get through a full test. And then you can, you know, practice timing yourself because I think the time is really the challenge on the LSAT. I also think that spending a good amount of time reviewing practice tests that you've done and understanding where you went wrong and how you can get better is the best way to learn. I would kind of figure out what I was stuck on and then I just watch YouTube videos on it. I really didn't want to spend a lot of money on LSAT tutoring and I didn't have to. I think it just really takes time. A lot of people find success in having a tutor. And I also didn't have any friends writing the LSAT at the same time. I think that would have made it easier if you have a study buddy who's also working on that. So yeah, I think it's more about diligence than it is about how much like money you spend on the LSAT.
Awesome, thank
I
you.
sorry,
Go
okay.
ahead, Kylie. No, go ahead.
No.
I was about to jump you in.
Oh, okay. Honestly, I feel like I did the exact same thing as Juliet. Like I really focus on the practice test. So I didn't really have much to add though. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like I like confession time. I didn't actually write the LSAT because McGill doesn't require it. So I have nothing to add. But I did study for like 2 weeks because I was like, oh, like this is interesting. And Khan Academy was the best, but like nothing else to add on the LSAT front.
Awesome. Thank you all. That's super interesting. So yeah, if you don't want to do the LSAT, maybe apply to. Yeah, so the next question we're kind of this is like more orientated towards Tim, just because we're really curious around what the experience is like at McGill in terms of combining the like common law and civil law and how that's like going. And yeah, just I know you're like just starting your law school journey, but I'm just curious around, yeah, if you could speak to that a little bit and what you've been finding around that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I don't have a really strongly fully formed like opinion on it, but I'll just put some things out there. I think I'm sure this is the case with other law schools, but I think a lot of folks go in expecting to learn like just these neat and tidy rules and then apply them. And that is 100% not the case. I think at McGill, again, I'm just kind of guesstimating here. So if I'm wrong, please feel free to jump in. But there's definitely a huge critical and theoretical aspect they try to bring in to kind of contextualize the two, like the bijural, the common law and civil law systems. I think that it might add to the learning curve, to be honest, at the beginning of your degree, because you're what someone said is like it's not like you're learning two languages separately. You're kind of like learning them at the same time. And sometimes, like if you have a parent who speaks two languages, sometimes you'll learn a word in one language and then you learn a word in another language, and sometimes you don't know which is which. And so there's a bit of like disentangling that you have to do, but also finding commonalities between the two legal systems and areas where one legal system could benefit actually from learning from the other. So I find that really interesting. I've obviously got an attachment to Quebec. I grew up here, and so learning the civil code, the civil law is also, I think, really helpful. But I don't think you have to be interested in practicing in Quebec to come and learn the civil law system, because there is like a theoretical and a critical component, which I think, at least so far in my experience, McGill does quite well. And the other thing I'd say is that not every course is taught in that transsystemic way, because obviously constitutional law, criminal law, it's just one system. And so it's not like it's like that for every single class, but certainly for the private law spheres, so torts and contracts, you're really parsing through different ways of learning and different ways of knowing and different ways of practicing. And yeah, I find it really interesting, but not for the faint-hearted, I think. Exam revision is getting a little bit messy. So
It's that time of year. I'll just blame it on the fact that it's darker much earlier. For sure. But thank you so much, Tim. I think we should move forward and potentially talk about financial aid, scholarships, bursaries, both from Lori's perspective as an admissions advisor, but then also from the perspective of current students. I'm just wondering what financial options could potentially be available to prospective law students who are already enrolled, and if anybody has any experience gaining some sort of scholarship, bursary, etc., anything along those lines. Does anybody want to particularly start or jump in?
I'll jump in from the admission perspective, because I deal with entrance scholarships and awards. So we do have a very healthy entrance scholarship and award pot for incoming 1L students for both the JD and the JD-JID. The scholarships are merit-based, so that's based on your GPA. We also have a lot of awards. So those are based on the terms of reference that are identified by the donors of each of those awards. So for example, if you're a rugby player, please be sure to include that in your personal statement if you're applying to UVic Law, because every year I have to find somebody who's a rugby player. It could be for a female student entering law. It could be somebody who's interested in environmental law or business law. It could be for a Black, Indigenous, or person of color. It could be for somebody who's from a particular area in BC. These donors have donated money because for very personal reasons. And so I take quite a bit of time to try and ensure that I'm matching the appropriate student with the award that matches, so that the student that matches the terms of reference for that specific award. So normally what I would do is once I get the class in place, usually in about June, July, I will sit down and I will start to do that matching. And by the end of August, early September, nominees of those awards will be notified of the amount that they have been nominated for. Once they get that, then in 2L and 3L of the program, that's done by Student Services. We do not have as healthy a budget for 2L and 3L right now. That is something that we are working on. We recognize that there is a funding lack there, and we are working on that. We also do have a financial aid officer here in the Faculty of Law who will work with you on bursaries and emergency funding, for example. But having said that, what I always say to people is you do not want to depend on entrance scholarships, awards, or bursaries to fund your legal education. If you get an award or a bursary or a scholarship, bonus. Just think of it as a really nice addition, but do not come into law school hoping, wishing, believing that you're going to get a scholarship to fund the entirety of your law school experience, because that is a recipe for disaster. So what I say to people is, if you have time, what I recommend is think outside the box for funding opportunities. I often say to people, do up an email or a letter, introduce yourself. Here's my why law. I'm applying to these particular law schools. Here's the reason why. Here's what I want to do with my law career, and fire it out wide and far. So for example, a lot of people, I know there's nonprofits that have a lot of money that people do not access because they don't apply for the funding. When you're out at a Christmas party, for example, tell people I'm applying to law school. This is my goal. This is my why law. And start networking. You will, let them know you're looking for funding opportunities. Send your letter out to law firms, to nonprofits. Sit down on the computer, do some research, and fire it out. Will you get a lot of no, there's no funding available? Yes. All you need is one or two that come in and say, yes, we'd be very interested in funding your legal education for you. That will be a huge help. For example, another example is if you have family members that work in unionized jobs, often those unions will have funding for family members to apply for. So again, really look outside that box for funding opportunities and prepare so that when you enter into law school, into that first year law, you have the finances behind you to pay that tuition and support yourself through law school. And then if you get an award, fabulous. That's great.
I would agree to not plan too heavily on having full financial aid. One of the reasons I chose Dalhousie is because of their really robust scholarship program. Over 60% of students have received some sort of aid, and it's been really helpful throughout my first and my second year. A lot of it's based off financial needs, so sometimes you have to have a loan. My cost benefit analysis for law school is really worth it. I think it's worth it to take out a small loan to be in the career that you want to be in. And so some people who, had funding from other places weren't able to apply for needs-based grants or other things at the law school if they didn't have a student loan. So I think that's something to consider, even just applying for a small loan so that you have not only the kind of grants that the provincial and federal government will often give you, but also to have that needs-based assessment going in so that you can apply for specific types of scholarships. That's a really specific thing, but I think it's something that a lot of people miss in their summer before law school is just like not applying for a student loan, even if it's really small. So that's my little tip.
Awesome, thank you. Does Tim or Kylie want to have anything to contribute before we move on to the next question? Or
Sure, I guess some funding options I looked at were like scholarships, and there are like a number of like Indigenous scholarships, like the Indigenous Bar Association has like a student scholarship every year, and like the Aboriginal Law Forum also as well. So yeah, there's just some like options like that like obviously are not fully funded like for the full school year, but they're definitely helpful. Yeah, I don't know if anyone's Indigenous here, but that's like what I do. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, as for McGill, sorry, I'm not like advertising McGill in any way. It's just the experience that I have to share. Uh, like there's the McConnell Foundation, which does really good scholarships and funding opportunities for students who come to McGill specifically. So I really encourage folks to check that out. And I also know that different like banks in Montreal will give like certain preferential rates on lines of credit for law students. So there's like a professional degree thing where although like you're an undergrad at McGill, law and medicine are officially undergraduate programs at McGill, the funding opportunities when it comes when it comes to loans and lines of credit, things like that, are at a different level. Like they recognize that like a regular undergrad degree versus a professional degree is a very different reality. So that's important to keep in mind.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for sharing. So we're coming towards our last like formal question before we open it out for the Q&A. So this probably applies a little bit more to the law students is how do you balance law school and your personal life, and kind of what strategies have you found to be helpful in that?
I don't mind taking a stab at this one, because it's definitely been there's definitely been a change in my lifestyle from January to now. Two big things, both of which are kind of annoying to hear, but they're really true. So I want to emphasize them. Sleep and Google Calendar. Those are my two weapons to get through the day, are making sure I slept enough and planning out my day. It's so easy, at least for me. Like honestly, like to be honest, in undergrad, I would use like calendars to get through my day, but I wouldn't rely on them at the level I do so far in law school. And that's just because if something's not on your calendar, it's in your head. And so it's either going to fill up space in your head or you're going to forget it. So for me, that worked fine undergrad for whatever reason, but it definitely would not work in law school. So yeah, I rely on that thing a lot to make sure that I'm putting everything on my calendar. I'm making sure that I'm able to do things, that my schedule is feasible, that I'm starting ahead of time, that I'm not panicking to finish things at the very last minute. So that's really really helpful for me. But like number one is sleep, sleep, sleep. Like if I at least for me, if I can't sleep, I can't like get to the end of the day with the level of energy that I need. So yeah, just these basic life habits I think are super important, and it begins with sleep. So and no doom scrolling in the evening, which is a lesson I've had to learn the hard way.
I could go next. Yeah, like sleep is great and Google Calendar. I guess to add is like taking care of yourself in like physical ways. So making sure like you're eating properly, like nutritious meals. Like I know I love KD too, but also just adding something into that would be like helpful, like for your brain. And like physical activity, I would say like obviously living in Victoria, like it's beautiful here. So just going to the ocean or going like for a hike, like a quick hike, like that's also like really helpful. And yeah, so I just would add that.
Yeah, I'm no one without my Google Calendar. I'm nowhere if it's not in there. And the sleep and the eating thing is huge. I was going to mention that when we were talking earlier about like things you can do to get ready for law school, learning how to like make really easy recipes that are freezable, and just like learning how to feed yourself in a way that feels good. I echo the exercising thing as well. So key for me. And then it's also just been incredible to build a really strong community within law school, to have like support and friends there, but keeping in touch with people who are not in law school, like people who can help you like touch grass in a metaphorical sense, like just really get you out of the bubble that can be this very like centralized program. So yeah, I think, maintaining those relationships while developing new ones has been pretty key.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing and for keeping it so real. And yeah, so I think with all of that, I think it's time to move on to the Q&A portion. So we've had some people message us on the Q&A function. And if you have any questions, feel free to use it right now. But we're just going to be working based off of the questions that we've already received. So feel free to type them if you come up with them, but no pressure if you don't have any questions, if you just want to listen. But for the first question from somebody in Zoom, this is for all the law students. Why did you pick the law school that you chose? So feel free to do a popcorn style. If anybody wants to jump in first, go right ahead.
Okay, sure. I chose UVic because it's the first ever program to be trans-systemic for Indigenous legal orders and common law. So that really spoke to me and like the work I want to do. It was like a easy choice, I guess I would say. Like I did apply other places just like, to be sure. But yeah, UVic was definitely my number one just for that.
Yeah, I definitely applied a couple other places. I grew up in BC and went to UVic, obviously, so I wanted an adventure. I was kind of interested in trying out another place. I really considered U Ottawa, but ended up at DAL because they have a law and technology certificate program. And I also just really wanted to live in Halifax. I wanted to try out the other coast. So I think you are going to be living somewhere for 3 or 4 years if you do a combined program. And so I think it's worth thinking about, where you're going to be happy, and what's going to be best for you. I'm really glad that I made the decision. If I could advocate for you to go out of province, I would say if you want to do it, try it. And then, yeah, I also just think that the diversity of perspectives that come to a national law school like DAL are really cool. I know people from all over the country now. And I want to dispel the myth that you have to go to law school where you want to practice. So would advocate considering going out of province if you want to.
so many West Coasters end up on the East Coast. I've met quite a few who did the UVic to Dal thing, which is fantastic. Um, I chose McGill because, like I said, I grew up in Quebec, so I felt I'm bilingual, and I felt like I wanted to learn the law in like a really blended setting. So two legal systems, two different languages, but also a setting that is willing to be quite critical of the law and push it. It's a quite progressive law school, and I love Montreal as a city. It's really a city where anyone can just kind of be themselves, which is, I think, kind of the goal. So that's fantastic. I think Jules mentioned diversity of perspectives. I really feel that at McGill as well. And I really, really enjoy that. So it really opens you to all different ways of seeing the world and challenges you in that way. Um, yeah. And I think, yes, also a law school that doesn't have as its only path practicing in big law, which I think that institutional pressure exists at other named law schools, but McGill, I think, really encourages you to do what you want to do with your law degree. And I really like that flexibility and that openness.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So another question, this is just, I think, more aimed at Lori. And somebody was just wondering around, you mentioned that UVic has like an inclusive admissions category, and they're wondering what that includes, or like who is included in that.
Great question. I'm very excited about the inclusive. We rewrote all of our admission streams 2 years ago, and the inclusive used to be our discretionary, which was the language was very deficit based, and we've rewritten it, I hope, so applicants see it as very strength based. The inclusive admission stream is for applicants who have experienced barriers that have impacted their ability to obtain a competitive GPA or LSAT score. So that can be for anything. For example, it could be medical, it could be family reasons, it could be institutional systemic barriers. It could really be anything. The onus is on the applicant to show us a clear connection between the why they're applying within this admission stream and the direct impact it had on their ability to obtain a competitive GPA and or LSAT score, what they did about it, and what's different now. I won't say I've seen it all, because every year I'm surprised. But I have seen people who have come in through this one for medical reasons, for physical, for family responsibilities, for cultural, for I've seen people write for racism. I've seen homophobia. So really anything. It's just you have to show a clear connection between why you're applying within this admission stream and how it impacted your ability to obtain a competitive LSAT or GPA, and what's different now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lori. So the next question is specifically about public speaking. So this person was asking, do you have any advice to improve public speaking? And is this an important aspect of law school? So this could be a holistic, everybody can answer sort of question based on personal experience or just based on your own public speaking journeys. But if anybody wants to jump in, feel free.
I don't think it's like that important. Yeah, I think there are sometimes you'll have to speak in like a moot or like a fake court setting where, you know, in 1 or 2 courses throughout your degree, you'll have to speak in front of a small group. I mentioned public speaking early on because that's something that I really enjoy as a skill. And so I want to do litigation. And so there are certain types of law in which public speaking lends itself really well to, but it definitely is not mandatory. Most of law is not public speaking. Most of it is reading and writing.
Agree.
I agree too. And UVic also has like advocacy courses and like other courses like Law Center. So those also like help you with like engaging those skills.
Thanks, everyone. So now we kind of have a question about the LSAT again. But somebody's just wondering, how was it like in terms of taking it, and did anyone have to take it multiple times, or do you know anything about doing that, and yeah, how that kind of works?
I took it twice. I did better the second time. I thought about taking it a third time and then decided not to because I didn't have enough time to study and I didn't really need to do that much better. I think it's worth it to do it more than once. I wouldn't do it more than 4 times. And yeah, I wouldn't be scared to try again.
I agree with that. Although I only took it once. I took it like in the last, like January is like the last time you can take it before like that year you're applying for. So I just kind of rolled the dice and hope that my studying was good enough. And yeah, it was so cool. But yeah, I would advise taking it like more times just like for, peace of mind.
The only follow-up I would have on that is check with the law schools that you are interested in applying to. So for example, UVic will take your highest LSAT score. Some law schools will take the average of all the LSAT scores LSAT scores. So you want to make sure, this is part of being that strategic. You want to make sure if you're going to write multiple times that you're applying to law schools where it's not going to have potentially a negative impact on your application.
Awesome, thank you all so much. So next we have a question about GPA. I know that different law schools have different GPA thresholds, different GPA expectations, but is there any sort of standard GPA that people should aim for? And a follow-up question as well, if someone's GPA isn't necessarily as good as the admission standard at a specific institution, could other things potentially carry more weight within their application, such as extracurriculars, work experience, life experience, etc.? So I'll start with Lori, and then we can open it up to the rest of the group as well.
It's a complicated question. At UVic, we don't set a minimum GPA or a minimum LSAT score. Across all it, like I said, across both programs and all admission streams, I'm going to calculate your GPA and your highest LSAT and come up with an index. The only place really where that is going to make a significant impact is in the JD General. The admissions committee and I determine every year a presumptive level. So if you hit that presumptive level index score, we're going to make you an automatic offer of admission. Then we have what we call a waitlist range, which is if you fall within that range, you're going to go forward for a holistic review to the admissions committee. This year, the admissions committee has actually taken on the task of trying to review all applications holistically, because what we're finding is there are applicants who might not fall within that general waitlist range that actually we would really like to review and potentially make it to whom we potentially would like to make an offer. So this is the first year we're going to actually trial that. In all of the other admission streams across both programs, that index score, that GPA, and that LSAT score are not the primary indicators of your potential to be successful. So this is where your personal statement, potentially your references, potentially your other statement that may be required is really going to make a difference. And like I said earlier, it's not about law school, it is about you. So this is where that authenticity, that vulnerability, and that strategic piece is really going to come into play. So for example, a lot of people discount the power of that personal statement. That personal statement is huge in your application form. So for UVic Law, it's 2 parts. Part A is 750 words where you are going to tell us why law, why UVic Law, and how you're a good fit for UVic and how we are a good fit for you. As you've heard from Tim and Juliet already, all the law schools across Canada, you're going to get an exceptional legal education. It's really about finding the law school that is the best fit for you. So that's what we're looking for in that, and that's 750 words in part A. Part B is where you're going to use bullet points to tell us more about yourself. And then If you're applying, let's say, within the inclusive stream, you're going to do an inclusive statement where you're going to tell us what happened, how did it impact your ability to obtain a competitive GPA or LSAT score, what did you do about it, and what is different now? And then you're going to submit to us an academic reference and then a reference, an employer or a character reference. Those things will all be taken into consideration holistically. Each and every piece of your application is going to be looked at in detail. They're going to be looking at who you are, what you could potentially be bringing to the UVic Law School and the environment we're trying to build here, and your potential to be successful. So at UVic Law, our goal in the admissions and recruitment process is to admit the broadest representation of Canadian families and society into UVic Law. So that is that's Black, that's Indigenous, that's people of color, that's foster kids, that's adopted kids, that's mature students, that's single parents, that's people from urban centers, that's members of the LGBTQ community, that's members from the rural communities, and that's all of the intersectionalities that we all bring as individuals as well. So it's about you. It's not about law school. We are really, really interested in who you are. And when I say, what are you bringing to the table? A lot of people will say, you know, my undergraduate provided me with the opportunity to further expand upon my exceptional written and oral communication skills, my writing, my critical thinking, my ability to read large amounts of text and retain that information. Put that in part B. What we're looking for in that question, what are you bringing that's going to add value to the community and the environment we're trying to build, is what have you learned from your lived experience up to this point in your life? What lessons have you learned? What knowledge, experience are you going to bring? So for example, I use this as an example when I'm talking to people about that. Several years ago, I was invited to sit in Circle. I was working on a huge project to support Indigenous students at UVic, not in law, in a different program. And there were Indigenous elders, Indigenous community members, Indigenous students, Indigenous faculty members. I was one of the only settler people on that committee, and it was an incredible experience. After about 3 weeks, I had one of the elders come to me, and they beautifully said this, far nicer than I'm about to say it, but they basically said, "We love having you here, Laura. You really contribute a lot. We're really enjoying having you here. We just want to suggest that sometimes the best way to learn is to sit in silence." And so what I took from that lesson is, from now on, what I do when I'm sitting, especially in a meeting situation, is I listen to understand. I don't listen to respond. And that would be something I would put in my personal statement if I was applying to UVic Law. That is a lesson that I learned on my journey to where I am right now. Does that answer the question? I kind of got off on it.
That's super helpful. I'm just wondering if anyone else from the panel has anything to add around that, or yeah, just thoughts around GPA. It's fine.
I do, shocking, but I would urge you to not self-select out of applying to law school if you don't feel like your GPA is high enough. Not only can you make up for it in your LSAT score and your personal statement, like Lori mentioned, I just really don't think that you should sell yourself short even this early on. You may as well try. And yeah, I know a lot of people who self-selected out who definitely could have gotten in, who I talked to later and who are now applying in the next cycle. And so, yeah, I would just encourage you to apply with the marks that you have and do the best you can on the LSAT. And sometimes that can make up for it.
Yeah, first of all, I think that's really great advice. And second of all, I've got I've got friends who've got really high GPAs from undergrad, friends who've got not as high GPAs undergrad. Ultimately, you're not walking around with your GPA on your forehead. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And there are folks who do fantastic in undergrad, who have a harder time with law school, and vice versa. It really isn't. It's one indicator. And I think McGill, much like UVic, looks more holistically at your applications. So do not self-select out. There's these committees are for sure looking for a lot more than just one form of intelligence and one form of excellence, looking for you as a person. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So the next question is Kylie. It's kind of for like Kylie, Jules, and Tim. There's a question about what has been your biggest challenge since starting law school? Or what do you wish you knew before starting law school?
This is a really tricky one. Maybe I'll try to say some stuff while my other more experienced peers think about their advice. I like I think the kind of not shocking, but the thing that I've been really confronted by is just like the volume of reading. To be honest, in undergrad, I maybe wasn't the most diligent with readings ahead of class, but in law school, there definitely is an expectation that, at least for me, at least at McGill, the bar is set a bit higher. So just being prepared to sit with all that information and read all that information, I think was a bit overwhelming at first. I've also heard, and again, I'm like, it's my first semester, but I've also heard that it gets a lot better, a lot easier. That over time you know what to read for, you understand what you're looking at a lot more. It's much more intuitive because you're learning a new language, a new system. So I've just been reminded to not be so discouraged if I feel like I'm uh, grasping at straws a bit. Like it's a completely normal feeling, and it's something that you can get better at, like any other skill. So that's kind of what I'm holding on to as my light at the end of the tunnel here. But yeah, I think it's good to be mindful of because I knew there was a lot of reading in law school, but for sure when the first couple months I was like, well, all I do is read, which is not like not fully accurate, but definitely an increase in the scale of reading. Yeah.
I'll go next. I feel like the biggest challenge is also, yeah, definitely reading. And I feel like my experience is like different just because my first year was in COVID. So like it was online. So then like going to second year in person, like making relationships and like people, like it's just different. It's like very weird. So I feel like that was really challenging because different people like have cliques already or like they make new ones because like in-person dynamics are different. So I feel like that personally that was my biggest struggle, like kind of navigating through that. And yeah, just like making sure you don't need to be everybody's friend is like something I'm often told. So yeah, just like find people that yeah, fill up your cup, make you feel good and like that you like work well with and then you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think the thing I would say is similar to that, that like law schools are really unique social environment. It can be really competitive at times, just in the nature of like how I think it most law schools in Canada, you're graded on a curve. So you're kind of graded against your colleagues, which can be really challenging in terms of how to navigate social dynamics because some people are very, very competitive and that can be kind of difficult. I think like you find your people and you stick with them. You don't have to be friends with everybody. You don't have to like play the competition game. I think it's better at some schools than it is at others. I think the three schools that you're hearing about today are generally thought of as having a fairly collegial community. I found that Dal has been really wonderful, but there are definitely horror stories at other law schools that you hear about. And so, yeah, I think the competitive environment, it's to some degree is inevitable, but there are a lot of ways to get around it. And that was challenging, but like Tim said, I think it gets better after your first semester. Like even January will be better.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much. So this question is for Lori. So this person was just wondering if there are any accommodations for Cal students or Center for Academic Learning students who may have learning disabilities at UVic Law or in the application process.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots of our students register through Cal and then get accommodations through our student services office here. There are also accommodations, I know, for a variety of other reasons. We have an amazing student support group here. We have a in-house counselor, we have a student support coordinator, and we also have a student support office. So our Associate Dean of Student Support would be the one, Andrew Newcomb would be the one that you would talk to around obtaining accommodations. There are also accommodations through LSAC. So if you need an accommodation for the LSAT, you can apply for an accommodation through LSAC, as well as you are eligible to apply for a fee waiver through LSAC. And if you are approved for a fee waiver through LSAC, then all you have to do is email me with a copy of your approved fee waiver, and I will waive your application fee to UVic Law.
Awesome, thank you. And now we kind of have like a specific question about the LSAT. It's just asking around upcoming changes to LSAT. I think that's referring to how they have taken out the logical reasoning component. And it's just asking like how might that change how this person prepares for the LSAT.
They're removing the games, right?
Yeah, like the games. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I believe it's due to accessibility issues. I think they got sued in the States because it wasn't accessible. So that I think that's great. I think that it does change a little bit in how you prepare. I think that you can spend more time on the other sections, which is good. I think the other sections are slightly more applicable to law school in some way, like the reasoning stuff. So yeah, I don't really think it'll change how you prepare that much. It'll just allow you to kind of focus your studying a little bit better.
And thank you so much. So now that we're nearing the end of our time, I feel like this is kind of a meaty question. So I feel like this is a good like closing off question. So this is just an open question for everybody. So what advice do you have for people on the fence about applying to law school? So this is your case to sort of plead like, hey, law school is really cool and awesome. So does anybody want to jump in and start?
I'll jump in and say this goes back to your why law. I was at a recruiting event last night as well, and at Capilano College or University, and if you're unclear of your why law, then take the time to determine if this is the right discipline for you. If you're very clear, then I think if you have a really clear understanding why law is the path and the discipline for you and your reasons for pursuing it, and your passion is there for this, then you're going to be successful, and it's a good thing to do. If you're unclear, then take the time. Law school is always here. It's not going anywhere. But it's better to come in really clear with a really clear understanding of why you're here and what you want to do with this degree.
I totally agree. I think that law school will be really hard if you don't want to be a lawyer. So I think you really need to sit and decide whether or not you want to be a lawyer, whether that looks like practicing law or whether there's like, you hear it I hear it all the time, that there's so many things you can do with a law degree. But I think that at the end of the day, like you are going to have these skills, you're paying the money, you're putting the time in to become a lawyer. So really deciding if that's something you want to do. And lawyers will be happy if you email them and say, hey, can I shadow you for half a day? Just like email a lawyer in Victoria. Many of them will be happy to do that. I did that. And for me, it really just confirmed that I wanted to do that. And then I shadowed another career in government and decided, you know what, that's like definitely not what I want to do. And I think it really affirmed it. Like people are really open to you learning more about what they do in their day to day. And so, yeah, take a minute and think about that. And you can always take a year or two. You don't have to rush in straight out of your undergrad. A lot of my friends here are in their mid to late 20s. Like Lori said, law school is always there. But I think it's worth it. And I think you should do it if you're thinking about it. Don't doubt yourself.
Sure, I can go. Yeah, definitely. I think if you're thinking about it, like you want to do it, like that's something you like want to do, but like maybe don't want to tell people, which is okay. Like I know like it's pretty, I think, intimidating. Like I feel like when I first like was talking about law school with like friends or like family or even like yeah, friends like members, they were like, oh yeah, it's school is really competitive, it's really hard. And they were like, yeah, not being so uplifting about it. So I think if you know in your heart that you want to do it and like you know you can do it, then yeah, then apply. And if it takes a few years to like figure out your why, then that's also like amazing.
Yeah, I think that at least in my experience, the people at law school, the professors at law school are some of the kindest, most brilliant people that you're going to meet. And I felt the community at McGill has really uplifted me in the past few months. I've just really felt like the communities, the people are just brilliant. Like people are just brilliant. They got amazing backgrounds, super smart, and I find that environment really fun to be in. It's true that hard things are hard, like, and law schools are hard things. So there's going to be things that are hard about it, and that's fine. But I think if you've got law school in your mind, it's because you've managed to overcome challenges before. And like, although there are days where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, this is really difficult, people make it through. And you look at upper years and they've gone through those moments and they've been able to get through. So I think if you're just kind of really clear-eyed um, about that reality, and you've got a really good sense of what your why is, and I don't think it needs to be like I'm going to be an immigration lawyer, but if it's like these are the purpose, this is the purpose, this is the reason why you're curious about law, why you want to go and do this thing, then I think like at least in my opinion, like that's enough. Like go out, write that personal statement, put it on paper, and see if it really reflects you and if it speaks to you. Um, and I think like Jules said, if it's on your mind and if you're thinking about it, don't sell yourself short. Go do it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect place to end this. Thank you, everyone. And it seems like everyone here now has an action item to go apply to law school. Um, but I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of the panelists who have kindly come and gave all of their insight, especially to Juliet and Tim, because I know it's so late where you are. So thank you so much for, you know, we're talking about sleep, but thank you for sacrificing that to give us so much of your insight. And I also just wanted to shout out to Chris, who is the UPS's Director of Student Affairs, and this event wouldn't be possible without them. So thank you so much, Chris, for organizing and helping everyone. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, hope to see you at our next event. We just to like do a shameless little plug, if you're interested in learning more about the UPS and getting involved, if you're a student at UVic, our Instagram is at UVic UPS. We post about our events. We also have meetings every Wednesday from 4 until 5 p.m. in the David Turpin building. So yeah, check that out if you're interested. And yeah, thanks everyone.